The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and bad decisions. It was Monday morning at Phoenix Dynamic Systems, one of those glass towers in Arizona where defense contractors pretend they're changing the world while billing the Pentagon by the hour. I was sitting in my usual spot, back to the wall, watching the door like I learned in the Army 25 years ago. Old habits die hard. My name's Mason Hunt, I'm 49, and I've been keeping secrets safe since before these kids knew what encryption meant. When Paige Wells walked into that room, I knew my day was about to go sideways. She's 29, blonde, Stanford MBA, and more importantly, she's the CEO's daughter. Been here exactly 3 weeks. I've been here 7 years, building their security infrastructure from the ground up. Phoenix Dynamic wasn't always this corporate. When I started, it was just another scrappy defense contractor with more government contracts than common sense. They specialized in drone technology for the military, the kind of stuff that keeps our guys safe overseas. Real work, important work. I'd spent 2 decades in Army Signal Corps before going private. Learned cryptography the hard way, in places where a broken encryption key meant dead soldiers instead of just angry customers. When you've secured communications in Afghanistan, corporate data protection feels like playing with toys. But toys that pay the bills. The company grew fast. Government money flows like water when you're building the right kind of hardware. Within 5 years, we went from 20 employees to 200, new building, fancy offices, and suddenly everyone wanted to optimize and pivot and synergize. Corporate speak for fix things that aren't broken. That's where people like Paige come in. All right, everyone, let's streamline our operations, Paige announced, clapping her hands like she was calling a sorority meeting. Her voice had that entitled ring that comes from never hearing the word no. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. We're pivoting to a more agile security framework. I took a sip of my bourbon-flavored coffee. In my world, when someone starts talking about pivoting and frameworks, they're usually about to do something monumentally stupid. I'd seen this movie before at other companies. Young MBA comes in, thinks they understand technology because they took a computer science elective, starts cutting redundancies. The conference room had that familiar tension. Junior developers shifting in their seats, project managers exchanging worried glances. Everyone knew something was coming, but nobody wanted to be the first to ask what. Paige walked around the table like a general inspecting troops, except generals usually understand what their troops actually do. We've been analyzing our operational expenditures, she continued, pulling up a PowerPoint that looked like it was designed by someone who thought pie charts solved problems. And we've identified several areas where we can achieve significant cost savings through consolidation. There it was, consolidation, the corporate euphemism for we're firing people. She clicked to the next slide. A org chart with red X's through certain positions. My position. Mason, she said, looking straight at me with the kind of smile that suggested she'd practiced this in the mirror. We've decided to bring security operations in-house to our IT department. Your consulting services are no longer needed, effective immediately. Just like that. No private meeting, no transition discussion, no thank you for 7 years of keeping our secrets safe. She fired me in front of the junior techs I'd trained, in front of the project managers whose bacon I'd saved a dozen times when script kiddies tried to penetrate our systems. It was a power play, plain and simple. New sheriff in town, showing everyone who's boss. Understood, I said. My voice stayed level. 20 years in Army Signal Corps teaches you to keep your cool when everything's going to hell. What's the transition plan for the encryption infrastructure? The question hung in the air like smoke from a misfired rocket. Paige's smile faltered for just a second. Transition plan? She laughed, and it sounded like a cash register. Mason, come on. We own the servers. We own the building. We own everything. Just pack up your stuff. It will reset your passwords by lunch. You own everything, I repeated, tasting those words. They felt bitter, like bad whiskey. Roger that. I looked around the room at faces I'd worked with for years. Sarah, the senior developer who'd called me at 2 a.m. when ransomware hit our test servers. Mike, the admin who'd learned more about network security in 1 year with me than most people learn in college. Reed, the help desk kid who actually understood that security isn't just about passwords. They all looked confused. Scared, even, because they understood something Paige didn't. I wasn't just another employee. I was the guy who built the digital foundation this whole company stood on. But you can't explain architecture to someone who thinks construction is just moving furniture around. I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked back to my office. Paige followed me like a bad smell, making sure I didn't steal a stapler or download company secrets. Protocol, she probably called it. No hard feelings, Mason, she said, leaning against my doorframe while I packed my gear. Her tone suggested she expected me to thank her for the experience. It's just business. You're expensive. We can get fresh talent out of college for a third of what we pay you. Fresh talent. Like security was an entry-level position you could fill with any kid who knew Python. I put my personal items in a cardboard box, my Army unit photo, Charlie Company 35th Signal Battalion, a picture of my Harley from last year's ride through Colorado, a small bottle of Maker's Mark for the really long days when systems went down and everyone expected miracles. Security isn't just about passwords, Paige, I said, placing my ID badge on the desk next to my still-running workstation. It's about trust and verification. The computers hummed quietly around us. 3 monitors displaying the company's security dashboard, encrypted communications flowing smoothly through channels I'd designed and built. 7 years of careful architecture, running like a Swiss watch. Don't worry about the computer, Paige said, checking her iPhone for what had to be the 10th time in 5 minutes. We're wiping it anyway. Of course you are, I said. I picked up my box and walked to the elevator. Didn't shut down the computer. Didn't log out. Didn't even lock the screen. Left everything running, just like I found it 7 years ago. Good luck with that pivot, I told her as the elevator doors closed. Yeah, whatever, she said, already typing on her phone. Have a nice life. The security guard in the lobby, old Mr. Gray, been here since the building opened, looked confused as I walked past with my box. Leaving early today, Mr. Hunt? He asked. Something like that, I said. I walked out into the Arizona heat, didn't curse, didn't punch anything, just got on my Harley, strapped the box to the back, and checked the time. 10:30 a.m. Paige thought she'd fired an employee. She thought she'd cut dead weight, optimized the vertical, achieved cost savings. She had no idea she'd just blown up the engine while the plane was at 30,000 feet. See, here's what Princess MBA didn't understand about paperwork. In my line of work, the devil isn't in the details. The devil owns the fine print. I rode my Harley through the desert for an hour, letting the engine noise clear my head. Nothing like 90 degrees of dry heat and open road to put things in perspective. The box with my personal stuff rattled against the back seat, but I wasn't thinking about coffee mugs and unit photos. I was thinking about page 47. 7 years ago, when Phoenix Dynamic was just another startup with more venture capital than common sense, they approached me to build their security infrastructure. They wanted to hire me as a W-2 employee. Standard corporate playbook. Bring the expert in-house, control everything, cut costs. I said no thanks. I've been around long enough to know that employees are liabilities to be shed when quarterly earnings dip. Contractors are creditors, and creditors have rights. More importantly, contractors own their intellectual property unless specifically negotiated otherwise. So I signed on as Ironclad Defense Solutions LLC, one-man operation. Me, my expertise, and a very carefully crafted service agreement. The company lawyers thought they were so clever. We want full ownership of any security systems you build, they said. Standard intellectual property transfer. I smiled and said, sure, we can discuss that. Then I spent 3 weeks with my own attorney, a sharp woman who specialized in defense contractor agreements, crafting something special. When I got home, I pulled the physical copy out of my gun safe. 23 pages of standard boilerplate plus addendums. I flipped to page 47 and found what I was looking for. Section 23C, Proprietary Encryption Environment Licensing. The encryption infrastructure, including but not limited to master authentication keys, security protocols, and vault architecture, developed by Ironclad Defense Solutions LLC, remains the intellectual property of the contractor. Phoenix Dynamic Systems is granted operational licensing for said infrastructure contingent upon active service agreement. Upon termination of services without approved transition period, contractor retains exclusive administrative access pending resolution of licensing transfer. Translation for people who don't speak lawyer. I built the lock. I own the key. They were renting permission to open the door. The beauty was in the next paragraph. Emergency termination without transition constitutes breach of licensing agreement. Restoration of access requires completion of asset transfer negotiations, including fair market valuation of proprietary systems. Fair market valuation. That phrase was worth its weight in government contracts. Paige, in her Stanford wisdom, hadn't read page 47. Probably hadn't read page 1. She saw a big consulting fee next to my name and figured I was just another line item to be optimized. She assumed that because the servers sat in their building, the control resided there too. Like thinking you own a house because you can see it from the street. I fired up my personal laptop. A beast of a machine I keep completely separated from corporate networks until moments like this. Military habit. Always have a backup communication channel. The terminal glowed with familiar green text. I navigated to the Key Vault administration console. Here's what most people don't understand about enterprise security. The encryption isn't just software sitting on their computers. It's a service. A living, breathing system that constantly verifies permissions and grants access. Phoenix Dynamics Vault wasn't hosted on their servers. It was running on secure cloud infrastructure that my LLC paid for and maintained. Every time someone at the company tried to access encrypted files, log into secure systems, or process classified data, their computers had to call out to my vault and ask permission. Please authenticate user Sarah Brooks for classified project files. Please verify administrator access for payroll database. Please decrypt communication logs for government audit. My vault would check credentials, verify the request against security policies I'd written, then respond. Access granted or access denied. It happened thousands of times per second, so fast that users never noticed the delay. It was the digital heartbeat of their entire operation, and I was the pacemaker. I typed a status command. Green text cascaded down the screen like digital rain. Vault status, active connected clients, 1, Phoenix Dynamics Systems. Authentication requests, 1,247 per minute service level. Premium contract status, terminated. Breach conditions met. That last line made me smile. The system had already detected the contract violation. When Phoenix Dynamics HR system logged my termination without a transition code, it triggered automatic breach protocols. I had written those protocols 3 years ago, after a different manager tried to throw me under the bus during a security audit. Called it my severance package, a little insurance policy for exactly this kind of situation. The system was elegant in its simplicity. Every Monday at 5 p.m., I manually renewed the security token that kept the vault accessible to Phoenix Dynamic. It took 5 seconds and was completely routine, like watering a plant or taking vitamins. If the token wasn't renewed, the vault assumed something had gone wrong. Maybe I was sick. Maybe I'd been hit by a truck. Maybe some corporate hotshot had fired me without reading the contract. In any case, the system would protect itself by revoking access until the situation could be resolved. I looked at my watch. 2:30 p.m. In 2.5 hours, Phoenix Dynamics' entire digital infrastructure would quietly, politely, and completely shut down. I could renew the token right now, be the bigger man, call Paige, explain her mistake, offer to help transition the system over 3 months like a professional. Then I remembered her laugh. Pack up your stuff. I remembered the way she dismissed 7 years of work like it was nothing. I remembered sitting in that conference room, being treated like outdated furniture in front of people I'd mentored and protected. I closed the renewal window without touching anything. Instead, I opened the emergency messaging system and queued up a simple notification that would display on every Phoenix Dynamic computer when the lockdown triggered. System security lockout. Contract violation detected. Outstanding consulting fee required for access restoration. Contact Ironclad Defense Solutions for licensing negotiation. That was too generic. Paige needed specific instructions, clear next steps. I deleted the message and typed a new one. Encryption services suspended due to contract breach. Licensing fee for permanent transfer, $5,000. Wire payment to Ironclad Defense Solutions, LLC for immediate restoration. I hesitated over that number. $5 million was significant money, but not unreasonable for a complete security infrastructure. Government contractors had paid more for less sophisticated systems. And honestly, After 7 years of building Phoenix Dynamics' digital fortress, I'd earned every penny. I hit enter, command queued, waiting for 5 p.m. I went to the kitchen and made myself a sandwich. Turkey, Swiss, and mustard on rye bread. It tasted like justice. Outside my window, the Arizona sun was starting its afternoon descent toward the mountains. In a few hours, the business day would end. Employees would start logging off, heading home to families and happy hour plans. Except this time, their computers wouldn't log off cleanly. This time, the digital heartbeat would flatline. And somewhere in a glass tower across town, a 29-year-old MBA with too much confidence and too little experience was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her career. I took another bite of my sandwich and watched the clock tick toward 5 p.m. Tick-tock, princess. Tick-tock. 4:58 p.m. I sat on my couch, laptop open, watching the real-time log of API requests streaming from Phoenix Dynamics. The screen showed a steady river of digital traffic. Authentication request. Success. Database query. Success file. Access. Success email encryption. Success. Hundreds of requests per minute. Employees finishing their Monday tasks, sending encrypted emails to government clients, accessing classified project files. The normal rhythm of a defense contractor wrapping up the business day. 4:59 p.m. I took a sip of Maker's Mark. Neat. No ice. My heartbeat was steady at 60 BPM, same as always. 20 years of military service teaches you patience. You don't force the outcome. You set the conditions and let physics do the work. I thought about Paige, probably sitting in her corner office right now, feet up on the desk, browsing LinkedIn for her next optimization opportunity. Maybe drafting an email to the board about how much money she'd saved by eliminating redundant consulting fees. 5:00 p.m. The timestamp on my terminal rolled over. Authentication request. Denied database query. Denied file access. Denied email encryption. Denied. The river hit a concrete dam. Every request turned red. Error messages started cascading down my screen like digital lava. Error. Vault access suspended. Error. Authentication. Handshake failed. Error. Encryption keys unavailable. Error. Service contract violation detected. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene at Phoenix Dynamics. It would start subtle, just another loading spinner that takes a few seconds longer than usual. Someone trying to send an email that won't go through. A database query that times out. Then the confusion would spread. Hey, is the network down? I can't access the Johnson contract files. My screen just went blank. What's happening? The entire project dashboard is frozen. Then someone would look up at the main display, that massive 80-inch monitor in the bullpen that showed real-time company metrics, government contract status, and security dashboards. The screen that was the pride and joy of their open-concept office design. It would flicker once, then go white. And in the center, in simple black text, System security lockout. Contract violation detected. Outstanding consulting fee $5,000. Contact Ironclad Defense Solutions, LLC for immediate restoration. My phone started buzzing, right on schedule. First call, Phoenix Dynamics IT Help Desk. That would be Reed Foster, the kid who knew how to restart routers but couldn't spell cryptography without autocorrect. Sweet kid, but way out of his depth. I let it ring through to voicemail. Second call, same number, then a third. The panic was climbing the org chart faster than I'd expected. Usually it tries to fix things for at least an hour before admitting they're screwed, but this wasn't a broken server or corrupted database. This was total systems failure, and they could tell the difference. Fourth call, a new number I didn't recognize. Internal extension, but not IT. Fifth call, Paige Wells Mobile. There it was. The moment when Princess MBA stopped optimizing and started panicking. I watched her name flash on my screen, could practically hear her voice, shrill, demanding, completely unprepared for a problem that couldn't be solved with a PowerPoint presentation. I didn't answer, just watched the digital chaos unfold on my monitoring screen. The system logs told the story in real time. Every application, every server, every automated process at Phoenix Dynamics was screaming for encryption keys. And my vault was responding with the digital equivalent of a polite middle finger. Request volume spiked to 10,000 per minute, then 20,000. The entire company infrastructure was panic flailing, trying every possible way to authenticate and access their own data. It was like watching someone frantically try every key on their keyring, not realizing the locksmith had already left town. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a flood of them. Sarah Brooks, senior dev. Mason, system totally dead. Paige is freaking out, says you did something. What's happening? Mike Rodriguez, network admin. Dude, they're saying you sabotaged the servers. I told them that's BS, but nobody's listening. Shane Brooks, junior dev. Help! Can't access anything. Paige is screaming at Owen Price on speakerphone. This is insane. I watched the messages roll in like battlefield reports. The troops were in chaos, command structure was breaking down, and the person responsible for creating this mess was probably standing in front of that blank screen, finally understanding what you own everything actually meant. You own the hardware, Paige. You own the building, the desks, the fancy coffee machine in the break room. But you don't own the software that makes it all work. You don't own the encryption keys that protect your government contracts. You don't own the authentication protocols that keep your classified data secure. You just fired the guy who did. I opened a new terminal window to check the database encryption status. Every government contract, every classified communication, every piece of proprietary drone technology Phoenix Dynamic had developed, all of it was encrypted with military-grade AES-256. Without the decryption keys currently locked in my vault, that data might as well be written in ancient Sumerian. Billions of dollars in intellectual property, rendered completely inaccessible in the space of 60 seconds. The phone calls kept coming. I'd lost count after 15. Different extensions, different panicked voices, all asking the same basic question. How do we fix this? Around 5:30, the calls stopped coming from random IT staff and started coming from much more interesting phone numbers. Washington, D.C. area codes, corporate legal departments, board members. That meant someone had finally read page 47 of my service contract. Someone had realized this wasn't a technical glitch or a cyber attack. This was a business dispute, and it was going to require lawyers instead of technicians. I poured myself another bourbon and checked the evening news. Nothing yet about Phoenix Dynamic, but it was early. Defense contractors don't usually make headlines unless something explodes or gets hacked by foreign governments. A simple contract dispute wouldn't be newsworthy, but the stock market would notice. Phoenix Dynamic was publicly traded, and when a defense contractor suddenly can't access its own classified data, shareholders tend to get nervous. After-hours trading would be interesting. My laptop chimed with an email notification. Corporate account, sent from someone's personal phone since the company email servers were part of the lockdown. Subject, urgent. System restoration required. From page.wells.personal@gmail.com. Mason, there's been a mistake. We need to discuss this immediately. Call me ASAP. The system is down and we have government deadlines tomorrow. This is costing us millions. We can work something out. I read it twice, then marked it as read and moved it to a folder labeled evidence. No greeting, no apology, no acknowledgement that she'd fired me 8 hours ago. Just demands and deadlines and the assumption that I'd drop everything to fix her problem. Classic corporate mindset. Create a crisis through incompetence, then expect the people you've screwed over to solve it for you. I closed the laptop and walked to my kitchen window. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and red. Somewhere across town, the lights were still on at Phoenix Dynamic, but the computers were as dead as doorknobs. And tomorrow morning, when government contract officers started asking why their secure communications weren't working, Paige Wells would have some very interesting conversations about optimization and cost savings. I finished my bourbon and went to work on my wood project in the garage. A nice walnut coffee table, hand-cut joints, no shortcuts. The kind of work that takes patience and precision. The kind of work that can't be optimized away by someone who doesn't understand what they're looking at. My phone kept buzzing on the workbench, but I was busy. Good craftsmanship takes time. And Paige Wells was about to learn that some things can't be rushed. Tuesday morning brought a different kind of chaos. The phone calls had stopped coming from panicked IT staff and started coming from much more serious people. Washington, D.C. area codes, corporate law, firms, the kind of numbers that bill by the minute and speak in Latin phrases. Someone had finally done their homework. At 8:15 a.m., a courier knocked on my door. Professional outfit, bonded and insured, carrying a thick envelope with red, urgent stripes that lawyers love so much. Inside was a cease and desist order demanding I immediately restore all systems and surrender proprietary access codes belonging to Phoenix Dynamic Systems, and threatening lawsuits for cyber extortion, breach of fiduciary duty, and intentional interference with government contracts. I read it twice, then laughed out loud. They were still treating this like some kind of ransomware attack where I was the criminal holding their data hostage. They didn't get it. I wasn't the terrorist. They were the squatters. I made coffee, sat down at my kitchen table, and drafted a response to the board of directors. I still had their personal email addresses from the original contract negotiations 7 years ago. To Phoenix Dynamic Board of Directors. From Mason Hunt, owner, Ironclad Defense Solutions LLC, Re. Service interruption and outstanding invoice. Gentlemen, I am in receipt of your legal correspondence dated March 16th. There appears to be a fundamental misunderstanding regarding the current situation. Yesterday, March 15th, your VP, Ms. Paige Wells, terminated our service agreement effective immediately without transition period or cause. Per Section 23C of our contractor agreement, copy attached. The encryption infrastructure remains intellectual property of Ironclad Defense Solutions, LLC. This is not cyber extortion or ransomware. This is a lockout due to contract violation and unauthorized termination. The $5,000 figure represents fair market value for permanent transfer of proprietary security architecture plus breach of contract penalties as outlined in Section 23D. I am not your employee. I am your vendor. You canceled the lease on your security system. You don't get to keep using it for free. The keys rotate automatically in 8 days. After that point, current encryption becomes permanently inaccessible regardless of payment. Respectfully, Mason Hunt Ironclad Defense Solutions, LLC. I attached a copy of the original contract with the relevant sections highlighted, then hit send. My phone rang exactly 12 minutes later. Ironclad Defense Solutions, Mason. The voice was tight, controlled, barely containing panic. Owen Price, chairman of the board, we need to talk. Morning, Owen. I assume you received my email. I did. Look, there's been a miscommunication. Paige is young, she's new to the industry. She didn't understand the complexity of our arrangement. Ignorance of contractual obligations isn't a valid legal defense, Owen. You signed the original agreement. You knew the terms. We're hemorrhaging money here, Mason, he said, his voice dropping. Clients can't access secure communications. Government contracts are stalled. Our stock dropped 22% in after-hours trading. This could destroy the company. I took a sip of coffee and looked out my kitchen window at the peaceful desert landscape. Sounds like a management problem, Owen. $5 million is impossible. The board will never approve that kind of emergency expenditure. $5 million is the replacement cost of 7 years of custom security architecture, plus penalty fees for breach of contract. It's actually quite reasonable for a system protecting billion-dollar government contracts. We can't pay it. We'll fight this in court. You can try, I said, my voice hardening. But litigation takes months. Your encryption keys auto-rotate every 10 days for security purposes. In exactly 7 days, current access codes expire permanently. No amount of legal maneuvering will recover mathematically deleted data. Long silence on the other end. I could hear muffled voices in the background, a heated discussion happening in real time. 7 days? Owen's voice was barely a whisper. Tick-tock, I said. I need to call an emergency board meeting. You know where to find me, I replied. I'll be waiting for the wire transfer. I hung up and checked my system logs. They'd stopped trying to brute force the encryption. The random access attempts had dropped to 0. Someone with technical knowledge had finally explained that you can't break AES 256 with determination and coffee. Around noon, my phone lit up with text messages from the team. Sarah Brooks. OMG Mason. They fired Paige this morning. Security walked her out with a cardboard box. She was crying. Mike Rodriguez. Dude, Owen Price is personally calling every board member. They found that email where Paige canceled your migration project. Legal is freaking out. Shane Brooks. They're trying to hack the system with some consultant from California. He took one look at the encryption and noped right out. Said it would take a supercomputer 10,000 years. I watched the messages roll in like battlefield reports. The internal collapse was happening right on schedule. Reality was finally penetrating the corporate bubble. 6 months ago, I'd proposed a comprehensive plan to migrate their encryption management in-house. 3-month timeline, detailed training program, complete documentation. It would have cost them $200,000 and given them total control of their security infrastructure. Paige had killed that project in her first week. Waste of resources, she'd called it. Current system works fine. Now that decision was about to cost them 25 times more than the migration would have. At 3:47 p.m. my email chimed. Subject: Emergency Board Meeting, Virtual Conference. From Owen Price. Mason, please join us via Zoom at 4:00 p.m. We're prepared to discuss terms. I could have declined. I held all the cards. But curiosity is a powerful drug, and frankly, I wanted to see their faces when they realized how thoroughly they'd screwed themselves. I spent 10 minutes setting up good lighting and preparing my screen sharing. Lined up the contract, the cancellation email from Paige, and current system status logs. At 4:00 p.m. sharp, I clicked the link, the screen filled with grim faces. 6 board members in expensive suits sitting in expensive conference rooms looking like they'd just received terminal diagnoses. CFO Jade Rivers looked like she hadn't slept. CTO Gary Morrison kept rubbing his temples. "Mr. Hunt," Owen said, his voice echoing slightly through the video compression. "Thank you for joining us." "Owen," I nodded to the camera. "Gentlemen." "Jade, we've reviewed the contract," Jade said, shuffling papers off screen. "Our legal team confirms your interpretation of the licensing clauses." "It's not an interpretation, Jade. It's exactly what I wrote and what you agreed to 7 years ago." "The board is prepared to authorize payment," Owen said quickly. "But $5 million exceeds our liquid capital reserves. We need time to arrange financing." "You have 6 days before the encryption keys rotate and this becomes a permanent problem," I said calmly. "After that, no amount of money will recover your data." "We understand the timeline," Gary Morrison spoke up. He looked terrible. Probably hadn't left the office since yesterday. "But surely we can work out some kind of payment plan." "Wire transfer," I interrupted. "Full amount. That's the only acceptable form of payment for a contract violation of this magnitude." $3 million, Jade countered. "We can have it wired by tomorrow morning." "No, $4 million plus we reinstate your contract at double your previous rate." "I don't want to work for you anymore, Jade. This conversation proves you can't be trusted to honor agreements." Dead silence. The board members exchanged glances through their video windows. $5 million, Owen said finally, wired to your business account. In exchange, you provide complete access restoration and transfer all proprietary systems to our control. And a public statement that this was a contract dispute, not a cyber attack, I added. I don't want FBI agents knocking on my door because someone thinks I'm a hacker. Agreed, Owen said immediately. Send me the routing instructions, Jade said. We'll need 3 hours to arrange the transfer. I shared my screen and displayed the wire transfer details I'd prepared that morning. As soon as funds clear, I'll send the unlock codes. You'll have complete control of your security systems within the hour. And this ends all business between us, Owen stated. Permanently, I confirmed. The board members signed off one by one until only Owen remained on screen. For what it's worth, Mason, this wasn't personal. I know, I said. It was just business. At 6:23 p.m., my phone chimed with a banking notification. Wire transfer received, $5,000. Source, Phoenix Dynamic Systems, LLC. I stared at that number. Enough to retire completely, enough to start my own consulting firm, enough to disappear if I wanted to. But I had one last job to finish. I opened my terminal and typed the master unlock sequence. Commands flowed across the screen like digital poetry. Unlock sequence initiated target, Phoenix Dynamic Systems uploading key package. Verifying handshake. Restoring access. On my monitoring screen, the red error messages began turning green. One by one, then in cascades, their systems came back online. I compiled a final data package containing root admin credentials, encryption documentation, and complete source code for the security vault. Everything they needed to never depend on me again. Owen, funds received, systems restored. Attached are your new keys to the kingdom. I've deleted all backdoor access and purged my administrative credentials. The system is completely yours. Try not to fire the next security expert without reading their contract first. Regards, Mason Hunt. I hit send, then closed the laptop. It was over. That evening, I drove my Harley past the Phoenix Dynamic building one last time. The lights were on, people were working late, probably trying to catch up on 2 days of lost productivity. As I waited at a red light across the street, I saw someone walk out of the building carrying a cardboard box. Even from that distance, I recognized the designer suit and defeated posture. Paige Wells, former VP of Digital Innovation, former CEO's daughter, former optimization expert. Current cautionary tale. She stood on the curb looking lost, probably waiting for an Uber. No company car for her anymore. I could have honked, could have waved, could have shouted something appropriately military and profane, but that would be unprofessional. I am precise. The light turned green, and I rode home to my peaceful house, my workshop, and my $5 million retirement fund. Sometimes the best revenge is just being better at your job than they thought possible. Competence speaks louder than any MBA, and always, always read page 47.